Previously on CoinKit, we created a Docker file that we can use to create an image that we can then run. Said image contains the Bitcoin source code. We then took our first baby steps into the build process. I enumerated the three amigos of autogen, configure, and make. We figured out that we need to run autogen first, and we figured out which dependencies it needed. We modified the Docker file to support all this and rebuilt the image. Now it's time to take our next step into the build process. In today's episode, we're going to take a look at configure. Let's start by opening a terminal window with the present working directory set to wherever you put the Docker file. Next, let's run our image. I note that in this step, it's not technically necessary to use this particular directory. I go here now as a convenience for a subsequent step. While we're here, let's take a peek at the Git log. We can see that we've committed the changes that we made in our prior step with autogen. And now let's look at Git status. Looks 100% clean now, as I expect. I remind you again that we don't ordinarily commit generated files. But in this case, we've broken the guideline because I want to keep close eye on whatever changes with each step. Let's take a peek at the directory listing. Oh, look! There's a file named configure. If you've been paying attention through prior file listings and Git statuses, you will have noticed that autogen created configure. Your next challenge is to figure out anything about configure. But I will spare you the trouble and tell you that it's a 1.0 megabyte lump of shell madness. Being a text file, that's a lot of madness. The basic purpose of configure is to examine the system that it's running on and look for a myriad of known differences between systems. For example, does your system have a C++ compiler on it or not? Is it big endian or little endian or not? Does it have woofers and tweeters or not? And many, many other differences. In this way, the build system has a reasonable prayer of actually adapting to whatever system it's running on and completing a build successfully. So autogen created configure, and that's the next thing to execute. So now we need to do the same thing to get past configure. Run it, watch it fail, figure out why, fix it, and try again. I won't bore you with the tedious details of doing that in this lesson, but I do encourage you to try this on your own. By using this technique, we discover many useful things. First of all, we discover that we're going to need to install G++, dh-auto-reconf, libssl-dev, and libevent-dev. Next, we have some fun with the boost libraries. Many magic recipes mandate the installation of libboost all dev, but that's just the lazy way of saying, I don't know which of the 5,000 libraries we're going to need, so let's just throw them all in. But you all are too cool for that, so let's figure out which particular libraries we want. Using these amazing techniques, we quickly discovered that we need libboost system, file system, chrono, thread, and test. Just 5. If you continue doing this, you will eventually discover that we're missing another dependency related to a wallet. But we don't need a wallet right now. We can override this by using disable wallet. At this time, we just don't want to mess with a wallet. Let's just do a minimal build and see how far we can go with this before we actually miss having one. So now the time you've been waiting for. It's finally time to execute configure. And look, it works. Now let's look at Git status again. Wow, look at all those files it created. Take a look at makefile. In fact, you look through this closely, you'll see a few makefiles. Let's take a closer look at what just happened. AutoGen created configure, and configure created, among other things, several makefiles. The makefiles are necessarily distributed in several different directories. These makefiles contain information to enable the third amigo, make, to create the actual instructions for compiling, linking, doing whatever else we want done. I note that the final product is not limited to merely ordinary executables. Perhaps we want to run tests, or assemble documentation, or create a zip file. So many things we can do with auto tools. But we can figure all that out later. For now, let's stay focused on our goal. Let's build Bitcoin D. Although what we're doing now will actually build some other things also, it will, in fact, satisfy our goal. As with AutoGen, we did this first part in the container. But when we exit the container, it's up in smoke time again for all of our changes. So let's amend the Docker file now to reflect all this new learning. First, let's exit the container. Now go back to our editor. And now we install g++, dh, auto, reconf, libsslddev, and libeventdev. And we want to install our boost libraries. And finally, let's run configure with the disable wallet option. And we will want to stage all the files that have changed for subsequent commit, and we want to commit them because we want to keep an eye on them. Okay. Now let's save our file, switch back to the terminal window. Let's rebuild the image. And don't forget the trailing dot. And now let's run it again. Okay, there you go. Git log shows us our two changes from AutoGen and configure. And Git status shows all clean like we expect. Well, that's all for today, folks. Please be sure to come back soon for the next episode of
The CoinKit Chronicles.